Greetings again, my name is Rob Sampson, and today we're talking about finding your sweet spot in language fluency. You know, there are lots and lots of ways to get fluent in a language. Many of us have the feeling that it's good to be taught a language, taught about the language, but really, to gain fluency, it's not about teaching, it's about learning to speak the language that really counts. I remember when I was a kid in middle school, and typical of English schools at that time, we were taught 3 languages at once: Latin, Greek, and French. And we were taught them. Even French was kind of like a dead language to us. It was the grammar, it was dictation, it was reading and stories and so on. I didn't speak any of those languages until the teenage years. I visited my uncle who lived in France in the summer and following summers, and I was mixed up with a bunch of kids my own age, and of course they were all French speaking. That was the moment at which I started to learn French for real. So first of all, I just want to be upfront with you. I don't have a preferred method that I'm trying to push for language learning. I know these days a lot of language gurus are pushing particular styles and things. This has always been the case. Someone finds a method that works and then they kind of franchise it and say it's the only way. You can kind of get a warning on this when they start talking negatively about other methods. If there's one thing that I'm kind of a main emphasis for me, is that there is no preferred method. Every method, in my view, works. Some longer than others, take longer than others to be effective, but they all work. People, Pashtuns who live and work in the Gulf with no language background, no literacy even, are able to speak fantastic Arabic. How do they manage that? I think there's a kind of a fundamental, natural way that people learn languages well, and if you contravene this sequence of events, you're probably going to struggle more. First of all, listening. You know, when babies are born, they're listening a lot. Even perhaps before they're born, they're listening in the womb. There's a lot of listening involved. The second phase of this natural cycle is speaking. You only speak after you've listened a lot. And thirdly, the last step is reading and writing. Unfortunately, when people are teaching languages, they often put reading and writing at the front before people can listen and speak. You can only read well if you can already speak well. So if you contravene that kind of basic 3-part sequence, you're going to be in trouble. But other than that, any of the methods that you use, as long as you're consistent and work hard at it, are going to be fruitful. When I was many moons ago, when I was a student at Columbia International University, the emphasis at that time was on what they call barefoot language or LAMP learning, community learning. The syllabus involved simply going out into community, finding someone who'd help you learn a language that you'd never spoken before, using certain tools, and then at the end of the semester being tested on how much you'd learned. For me, I was lucky I found a Swahili speaker. It's a relatively easy language, and just had a lot of fun learning those tools. So that's my background. I'm not trying to push that background. I think it's one of the useful ways amongst many. So, what is your sweet spot in language learning? You need to be able to find out what that is and then try to tailor-make your approach to learning Pukhto according to your strengths. There seem to be about 7 main ways that people have as a learning style. Here they are. First of all, logical. Some people, they just love figuring out why things work. They have a kind of grammarly mind, and they can't rest until they've figured that out. And people can learn really effectively and accurately from the logical approach. That's the way their brain comes across. Secondly, some people, like me, I'm more visual. You have to see the word for it to stick in your mind, either phonetically or with the Pukhto script. So the visual really helps. It could be visual pictures, but particularly the written learning words by different methods visually. Thirdly, social. Some people are really excellent at learning well. Their sweet spot is in relationship with people, just hanging out, chatting, listening, plenty of time with Pashtun friends. And for them, that just is like osmosis, and they pick up the language quickly. Fourthly, physical. For some people, they actually need to feel, taste, and see the language being used for it to make sense. So if they want to talk about, let's say, a fruit, mangoes, they want to know what the word for mangoes is. They find it hard to learn from a list of things, but if they go out and eat a mango and they have a discussion about buying mangoes and bargaining for a better price, it sticks with them forever. They need that physical connection, the context of the language for it to work. Some people have the gift of listening skill. They have the oral ability. They can listen. They're rather like parrots, and they can just mimic back fluently. Perfect diction, perfect pronunciation, and stress. What a wonderful gift if you have that. Sixthly, the verbal skills. Some people just need to speak a lot. They just need to get it out there and talk and talk and talk. And eventually their learning grows in leaps and bounds because of that. The seventh form of kind of style of language learning are the solitary learners. This is rather a surprise to me, but some people, I'm a bit like that in some ways, are able to study a language from tapes and by themselves and without a lot of interaction sometimes, and do extremely well. I know of an Urdu speaker who, she had a pot of peanut butter, some toast I think she had, and she'd lock herself in a room for a long period of time. And she was one of the best Urdu speakers that I've ever heard. She just thrived on that solitary thing. So you need to find out which of those things you are, and I've put a link for you to a video, to a program, a free program, a learning styles inventory. And you'll have to stop the video now, spend about 10 minutes to do this very quick free test, and then print out the results. It gives you a nice little graph, and we'll discuss in part 2 what to do with that, and 3 things that great learners have in common, and 2 things that people who really struggle in language often get tripped up by. Okay, see you back in just a minute. Welcome again. I'm Rob Sampson, and we're in part 2 of a short video on finding your sweet spot. I hope you've had success in figuring out how the inventory works. Have a look. I would suggest at 2 of your main sweet spots, the learning style that you really are strong in. And during the course of this Speaking Pakistani Pukhto, you will see some of the activities are really focused in on the things that match, that jive with your language learning style. Those are the ones that I would suggest that you use the most. And I'm not saying to completely disregard all the other methods, but because you're going to struggle with them some. Do them because they're also extremely helpful. And if you neglect some of them, like if you neglect the oral skills section, then that could be a real detriment to your learning. So try to do some of the other ones, but then look and see which of the things that you are particularly good at. So just as an example, I show you here, this is my learning style inventory, and you'll notice perhaps for me the 2 kind of peaks of learning style would be visual and verbal. So for me, it's really important to have something written down phonetically or in the Pashto text to learn effectively. The other thing is verbal, speaking a lot. For me, just speaking. The theory of linguistics is this: language is rather like a well. And in the well you have correct and incorrect things. It's important that you just keep on pulling water out of the well, and gradually it will cleanse itself. The mistakes and errors will over time will disappear. So look closely now at the 7 aspects, the 7 learning styles. Figure out a couple of things that are really good and be aware of those parts that, you'll really struggle to do well on that particular thing. So I hope that's helpful. Keep that chart, paste it on your wall as you go through your language learning. It'll help you no end. Over the years, I've discovered that several Pashtun learners, those who've been learning to speak Pashto, have done remarkably well in gaining fluency. So I'd just like to share with you 3 things that I've noticed amongst all these great Pashto learners, and a couple of things that I've noticed that have really hindered people. So 3 things that are in common with people who've really done well in language, and I hope that you can adopt the same thing. Number 1, they knew their own sweet spot style of language and they majored on it. I think we talked about that already. Secondly, they made their own approach to generating how they learn. They took control of the language themselves. They didn't wait for the book to fall on their head or to find a teacher. Often they didn't really have formal teaching at all. It wasn't a taught course as such. The fancy word for this is that they were autodidacts. They were self-learners. They developed the course and approach, and sometimes it was quite unique to them. The first really great Pashto speaker, a Scottish man in the 19th century, he wrote a letter to his mother one day and said that I'm learning Pashto like a lion. And he developed his own technique, which is interesting. I could share that with you sometime, what he did. And the same with other people. Somebody who was really good at learning language decided to live with a hostel of Pashtun young men for a period of time, and that generated one of the key building blocks of his, because it matched his learning style. And then the third thing that I've noticed about all these people who've done well in Pashto fluency is that they've dedicated a major portion of their life in commitment for speaking. If you wanted to learn the harp, or you wanted to be a chess master, or tiddlywinks, or you wanted to be a professional football player, all those people have one thing in common. They spent way too much time practicing. It's a huge commitment to reach a level of fluency. You imagine learning the guitar well is hard enough. Learning a language is much more complex. So if you skimp on time, if you can't give yourself wholeheartedly to learning the language, constantly working in small chunks and big, you're not going to be successful. So those are 3 of the areas where I would suggest finding your sweet spot, designing your own approach to it, and I'm going to give you some of the tools, choose the ones that work for you, and then really going at it wholeheartedly. And then a couple of things I've noticed, that some people, even with the best of intentions and hard work and blah, 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 they still manage to get caught. There are kind of 2 pitfalls that I've seen. One is fear of mistakes. To be a language learner, like a child, you notice when a child babbles, mama, 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 they make lots of mistakes. They're not worried about it. They're absolutely, the ability to laugh, to stumble around in the language, to have a kind of ambiguous mindset. Every time you hear something that you don't understand, it doesn't mean you have to stop the conversation. Just be flexible in your learning. And secondly, what I call another kind of stumbling block sometimes is people feel anxious when they speak Pashto in front of other people. It's kind of a language jealousy thing, perhaps we might call it. It's the comparison thing. Oh, they're doing so well. And of course, Pashtun friends, when they know several foreigners who are learning a language, they love to compare. Oh, she's doing so well. What's your problem? Don't let it get you. Just be dedicated to what you can do with the gifts and talents that you've learned. Some people will learn quickly and brilliantly, and other people will have to work harder. And that's just life, and enjoy. When somebody's really doing well in a language, then we can celebrate with them. It's a score for the team. It's not a comparison thing. So those two problems. I'd just like to finish with this wonderful proverb. The sabar mewa khwagahi, the patient fruit, the fruit of patience, khwaga, is sweet. And so that's my encouragement to you today. Develop patience and work hard at finding your sweet spot and developing your own method and tools that focus on that particular gifting that you have, and you will be like a sweet fruit to your Pashtun friends. See you next time.